Welcome to Raise the Bar. My name is Daryl LaBar and I'm excited to get started. So, what is Raise the Bar? Raise the Bar is a video series that I'm starting to hopefully be able to share and spread the best practices that come with having years of experience developing CRM, Dynamics 365, or customer engagement, plugins, JavaScript, and even third-party tools like the XrmToolBox plugins even as well. In this series, I'm going to take people that have open code requests, that have code that they'd like me to review. I'll go find code on GitHub just to go through and maybe do a couple pull requests and refactor and a review and that kind of stuff. It should be a learning experience for everyone. Hopefully it's at least semi-entertaining, and especially if it's something that we can do as a community as a whole to help raise the bar for everybody. That's the whole idea, is that we raise the whole bar for the whole community. That's just going to mean that it's going to be better applications for our customers. It means there's going to be less time spent fixing code that's just wrong, because hopefully more people learn and all that kind of stuff. So it's just another avenue for us to hopefully be able to learn and to grow in our roles as developers on this platform that we know as Dynamics 365. I'm probably going to refer to it for the rest of this time as CRM, because Dynamics 365 or customer engagement is way too long to say. So I posted a post on Twitter. Say, hey, I'm kind of thinking about this, and I got a few responses. It looks like they're very positive, so that's where we're at. We're going ahead. We're doing it. I did have someone send me some code that he wrote for the XrmToolBox. If you're not aware of what the XrmToolBox is, then you must be brand new to CRM, but that's okay. Go to www.xrmtoolbox.com and download it. It's a Windows app that has the best administrative tools and power user tools, bar none, in the world. It's written by a couple MVPs and myself. I did something like a couple years ago on it, and I don't touch it very often, except I encourage Tanguy and I encourage Jonas, as they're kind of the main developers of that. And every now and then I come in and come up with a good idea, and then they go do it for me. So, but so for today's episode, we are going to be looking at an actual plugin for the XrmToolBox. So let's go ahead and first take a look at what it is, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the code. So go ahead and bring that up. All right, so this is the security role members, is what this gentleman called it. And all this does is you click this button here to load the security roles. It goes and loads the roles. And then when you click on the role, and I'll list all the roles in the business unit, click on the role. I'm not sure if this is just a debug. He said it wasn't quite ready yet. I totally understand this is not production ready code, but this is something that we should be looking at here. So it clicks open, and that, oh, there we go. I have to click twice, I guess. Then it shows the users that have that role. He also wanted to expand it at some point in time to teams. He's not quite to that point yet, but we can go ahead and take a look at what he has now, and hopefully be able to grow in our knowledge and understanding of maybe even how to build an XrmToolBox plugin, but at the very least, just some C# coding standards here as well. So that's all it's basically doing. It's doing a query, pulling back the roles. When you click on the role, it goes and does another query to actually go get the actual names. So ideally, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through and trying to learn everything about the program. So hopefully I'm seeing with fairly fresh eyes. I kind of want this to be more of a code review experience. Code reviewing is something it's very interesting, because lots of times we say we just don't have time for it. But statistically, it's the most productive use of your time for finding bugs. Now, I'm not saying you should spend 8 hours a day doing a code review, but if you can spend that 15 minutes to half an hour to maybe 45-minute time slot, depending on how much code you're having to review, statistically, you're going to find much more bugs doing that than you are any other activity. So if you're skipping it, you're really skipping out on something that's going to make you more productive, not less productive. So make sure you're doing that. I mean, it's funny when we think of coding. If you think of an engineer that's building a bridge, and he has a project manager that says, hey, this is, the bridge has to be done at this point in time. You need to cut stuff out. He's not going to cut out testing. He's not going to cut out reviewing the product to make sure that everything's working, and he's not going to cut those things out. But when we get in the software world, because it's so much easier to change things, we tend to cut those things out, and then we pay the penalty, the cost later, with having to go back through and fix them. And everyone knows when you write that code, you can come back at it 3 weeks, a month later, you're starting from scratch. And so it's always harder to be coming in and doing it way later than if you just would have done it to begin with. So, so that's kind of another hope of this is to help other people start doing code reviews on your teams. It shouldn't be a lot of times. It doesn't have to be every single piece of code, but most non-trivial code should have somebody else to look at it. At the very least, maybe they've already solved that problem before at your company. Or maybe that's a new way of solving, and they need to solve it that way. It's an awesome, awesome tool for helping others to learn and grow, as well as to ensure we have high-quality code. So if you're skipping out on code reviews, you're really missing out on being very productive. Really, you're missing out on productivity. So, all right, so let's get back to where we actually are with our code here. So if I go look at this, we have a couple classes here. I'm going to go and collapse these all here. We have our role managers class, which is a fairly decent amount of code, 243 lines. Settings class, okay, this is supposed to be for serializing. It just says one little string. Then we have, I'm going to skip down here first. We have our actual plugin here. And if you're not too familiar with the XrmToolBox, you have to define your actual plugin with all of your metadata up here to define the different things that show up for the name and all that kind of stuff. You have to define those in this plugin class and inherits from plugin base. But then the actual real work of your plugin is your control, basically. So all this does is has this get control method that returns back this XrmToolBox plugin control, and the control really is your actual plugin. So now we're in the actual CRM control.cs class. And so this is the actual plugin itself. Looks like we have another class in here. It lists view item comparer and all that kind of fun stuff. So so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to probably go and take a look at the role manager first, and then we'll go look at that other plugin just to see at the actual plugin to see kind of what it is. So I'm just quick little setup here. I have and actually I probably want to close this window. So I have ReSharper installed, and if you haven't used ReSharper, it's a great tool, especially if you're new to coding, to kind of catch little issues here, and especially to kind of help with your naming conventions and things of this nature. So right now you can see here I've got one warning, and you can click on it, you can go here and hover over it. It just says the name service does not match the rule instance fields private suggestion name is _service. So basically I have it set up, and I don't know if this is the default. I think I've changed it. But my default for having private members, private fields, is to have an underscore in front of it. And when I do that, everything breaks. Well, ReSharper, you can do Control-RR, and I just put the underscore in front of it, and I'll go through and rename all those for us. So that's my standard. So is it the right standard? It's my standard. That doesn't mean it's the right standard. You are having to decide what the right standard is for you. And that's going to be probably a theme in a lot of these reviews, is to decide what is the way that you are going to do it. When I'm in an interview and I'm asking somebody, a potential new hire, a question, especially someone that's kind of higher up, senior or architecture level position they're looking to be hired for, I want to make sure that they can defend what their beliefs are. So usually my question involves early bound types, because I created the early bound generator. I have a preference, but I honestly don't care what they tell me. What I do care is how they're going to argue that point. So, do you use early bound or late bound types? Oh, you use late bound types. Why do you use late bound types? They have no idea that their early bound exists. Well, that kind of means you're not doing too well. Okay, so they know early bound, they know late bound, but they like using the late bound because it's faster. Oh, okay, so you think it's that you spend more time having to generate your early bound types and keeping those up to date than you would actually earn from that early bound typing, having to type everything up manually. I mean, I can ask them that question, and they can say yes, and they can say no. It's whatever they want to say, but at least they're arguing that point. So the point that I'm going to argue here with this underscore prefix is I want to avoid naming collisions. Service is a name that I'm going to pass into my methods a lot. For example, right here, we're passing in service as a name. And if I have the same name for this as well, that means I have to bring in this in order to distinguish the difference of it. And I'd prefer not to. I just prefer to have the underscore there. That way I know right away, oh, this is an underscore, this is a field, it's a class level field, and I can distinguish between that, and I can easily set the actual value and name that whatever I want to name that, and set that to be my internal service here. So So this is our class here. Let's look at, we have some methods here. And okay, so get recursive roles. Goes through, takes, okay, we're passing in our roles here. You can see we're sharper here. It's going to go through and it's going to yell at you and say, hey, this could be um, an actual I numeral, I think is what it's saying there. Yeah, yeah, you can make an I numerable, but in this case, that's one that I usually ignore. Let's just say that. All right, got some null checking there. Usually in all my programs when I'm dealing with lists, I always make sure they're created and then don't worry about null checking, but it doesn't hurt. So we got some null checking. I'm always a big fan of putting curly braces around every single if statement, just because it makes it guaranteed that you're purposely wanting to do a single line. If this happens, I find it less readable, and I'm not sure, did they intend to do that? Did they not intend to do that? You know, just makes it more explicit, that's all. Okay, so we have our roles. They're going and getting the business unit ID and comparing that. If it's that one, they return it. Else, apparently it didn't match for that role. So now we do this role get recursive. Take all the roles where it's not null, and it is equal to that. Okay, so here's something that we could do with very simple, new in C# 6 or one of them. I'm getting lost here, but so let's just do that. Okay, so this is the Elvis operator here, and basically it says, hey, if this is null, then just make this the default. This place would be an empty GUID. But if it's not null, go ahead and use it and compare it. So as long as our role ID is not an empty GUID, which I'm really going to assume that it's not, that works fine. And now our whole where statement is a lot more readable than this. If I was going to have that, I'd just put that on a new line just because I find that a little bit easier to shout and say, hey, this is all the same thing. It's being the same statement, and or anding it together rather than oring it together. So some people like putting it at the end, and you know it does the same basic thing, but I think this way when you put the and in front, it shouts at it. But even better is to eliminate the and entirely, which we did with our Elvis operator. There's our where statement, to list, okay, and then they're all roles. If it doesn't equal null, then we'll go ahead and return that actual child role, else return null. So we are either going to return in this function a role, a child role, or null. So it's looking at this list of roles. I'm just trying to figure out what has to be recursive here about this call. Just going to pause here and see if I can figure out what this does. So I think I figured out what is going on here. And the way I kind of figured out was to figure out what it's being called with. So I use this code map all the time. I put my cursor on the function, and that shows me where the other functions are in the actual file. You can see a little tiny purple blue mark here, and that's just shows me where it is in the file. I got this yellow one. Why is this one still showing we have an error? Oh, yeah, remove that. Cool. I always like having that green check mark there. It's kind of an OCD thing. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to get in the habit of, but it's one I definitely have gotten in the habit of. So, so I went in here and looked at, okay, we have the two listed here. This little box is my current viewfinder. I got one here, and I pass in a new list with a single role and a new list with a single role. So each time this method gets called, it's really only passing in a role. But so why is he passing in a list? Anytime that you are dealing with something where you don't know why they're doing something or what exactly it's doing, you probably need to spend some time refactoring it. And again, you can't spend all day refactoring it. You got to kind of pick and choose what to refactor. But let's go ahead and just work on this as a little option to refactor. So in reality, we really should name this thing better than what it is. Right now it says get role recursive. What does that mean? So really what this is saying is get parent role for BU. And so this is going to be the actual role that you're going to pass in, which is our entity. Okay. And that's our single entity we're passing in. And that's the business unit ID that we're looking for. So we have a role, and we're trying to find the role that's specific to that one. So I'm going to call that main one here. Something that helped in figuring this out is this is private, means it's only in that actual class, and that helps to make sure that it's not being called somewhere else differently. But really, every single call we have outside of this should really be calling get parent role for business unit. Let me copy that. So I'm going to update that one, and lost track where the other one was. There we go. Okay, so I updated those two. And this thing should return the same thing, entity, and I need to fix the actual call hierarchy for this. So it needs that one, and it still needs the all roles listed here. Okay. All right, and let's fix the order of these things. So find this given role, or the parent of that role for that given business unit, and then also I need all the roles here. Okay. Let's go ahead and just call this method here just to make it a little bit clearer. Checks for all the nulls, roles, makes sure this one's the right one or not. If it is, it just goes ahead and returns that one. If not, goes through and gets all those and keeps on looking at all those child roles. Child role is not equal to null, then it returns a child role, else we're done. Also return null. Alright, so that just makes our life a little bit easier for reading it. Lots of times people will tend to put comments in here and say, oh, this gets the parent role. That's a bad idea. Why is that a bad idea? Because you should just change the name of the function. That's a great comment. It'd be even greater method name. That's really what that is. Okay, so there wasn't much to refactor with that I was looking at. We'll just leave that there. All right, remove existing roles from principals. So we have a list of principals. We've got a background worker. It looks at the first principal role, and if it equals system user, it does something. So this is something I don't like very often. I've got to scroll way down here. Now granted, I'm at 177%, but I got to scroll way down here to see, is there an else to this if? And what is that else to the if? Okay, so right off the bat, I want to change that just because I don't like that. So how do you go about changing that when you're going through and doing your code, right? So the simplest thing to do is make functions out of this. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to name this, I have no idea what it does, but just by my naming conventions, this is the name, remove existing roles and principals. So this is going to be for the system user, right? The principal is going to be the system user. So this is remove existing roles from system users. So that's that one. I'm going to rename that method here. And this is actually just going to be remove existing roles from users from users. This one I think is going to be the same thing, only if we look at this, this is for the actual teams. Cool. So now, when I come in this method, before I had no idea what this thing was doing. I had a huge if statement, huge else, and now I can go through and say, oh, okay, this is going to go through, it's going to look at the very first item in the list and say, do I need to remove the existing roles from users or the existing roles from teams? So that's a good sample of how to go through and actually remove, to take code that's just too long and too nested, go ahead and refactor that into separate methods. Always recommend refactor that in separate methods. If your code, good rule of thumb, if you have to scroll a little bit more than once and you're not doing straight like huge lines of all these ifs, all these settings on one side, the other side, it's probably too long. It's just probably too long. So here's our query. Even the query, I mean, that takes up quite a bit of code. So this is probably better written as an actual method here. And this is going to be get roles for team. get teams with roles, I guess that is. Get teams with roles. Cool. That just makes code, again, a little easier to read. Sharper doesn't like all those ints. I don't like all those ints. There's people that declare, oh, it shouldn't be var. What? You have your reasons, I've got mine. Having everything lined up perfectly like that just seems to be more readable to me. Having a decimal in there, if I can spell decimal. Something that doesn't make it as readable. If I change the return type, now I got to change everywhere this is being looked at. That just tends to be work. This works a lot better for me there. This if statement, I don't really care if I do too much of that, so I'm going to refactor that as well. Import the progress, work at current total, remove roles from principals. And again, this is kind of annoying to me that you have to go through and specify all those things. So I might just make another overload for this thing. And it's something this small that really doesn't make that big of a difference. But if you've got a large project where you're having to do that all over the place, it really could help a lot. Lots of times when I'm writing things, I want to think about the actual call site that's going to use this. How is it going to actually look when this gets used? Then I write my method signatures so it works the way that I want it to get used. I want it to work like this. I don't want to be putting in all these extra statements every single time I want to use that. Control minus. That is a wonderful key. If you get lost in what you're doing, it takes you back to where you were. So if you don't know control minus, wow, you really should think about knowing it. It's a great key to know. These are kind of rather long here. I do want to include these on separate lines. So now if we do a before after what this is now, it's just a whole lot less for your brain to look at. You know, from here I had 98 to line. Okay, so that's 10 lines of code versus just 5 lines of code. It just tends to be a lot easier to figure out what exactly is this thing doing. So now we know the remove existing roles from teams, goes through, gets the actual teams. I hate returning entity collections. It rarely serves the actual purpose of what I'm wanting. Link doesn't make real good sense here, right? Because it's team, really. And again, that's a sharper rename there, just being able to quickly go through and rename that stuff. So now this reads a whole lot just smoother. Remove existing roles from teams, get teams with roles, get the count, go through for each team, report the progress, remove the role from the principal, and then go ahead and increment our current to help report our progress. So this line doesn't need to be there. That line can be there. If you're new to C#, this will increment it after that line's done, basically, and that's not exactly how it works, but for the most part, that's the way it works. This will increment it before you send it in. So I can do that right there, and I eliminated an extra line for my for loop. So that's always good in my mind. This is returning every single column. Probably shouldn't be happening that way. That's a big no-no. But right now, I'm not sure exactly what the columns are that we're using, so I'll just leave that there. But you should rarely ever do that. Remove existing roles from users. All right, so this is kind of similar to what we had before for the other one, only it has its own query rather than that query. Is it pretty much exactly the same? It's the same update statement, same refer principles. Okay, so this is the part where when I'm looking at this, I see it's an exact replica of the other method, right? The only thing that's different about it is, I don't think there's anything different about it. Is this method, get teams with roles. So let's look at what this is doing that's different. Is this report progress all the same? Yeah, looks to be the same there. So it's getting the role ID and system user ID. All right, so this is slightly different. We got a role ID here and a team ID here. We could be a little bit more frugal about this and say, hey, make this new method and pass in that this is the team name versus that, and that we'd have one method. But that's fine. We'll just leave that be and do the same basic work here. So We are in our method here. And so we're going to need a new method, and it's going to be called get users. So here I lost, where was I at before? And putting my cursor on the actual method helps me go find it. Oh, I also know I wanted to return an actual list of entity too. Let's just make that a single return statement. In this case, these are users. And don't like these. Do some tidying up here. We have the same. I think this method is exactly the same as the other one. So let's go ahead and check. This was update. Update. Oh, maybe it's report progress. Report progress. Awesome. Needs a worker. And it needs a current and a total. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make sure. I'm just going to copy paste that in. Okay, here's another control go to definition. I use all the time if you don't do that already. That is exactly the same thing. So look at that. We removed duplicate code. Always good to remove duplicate code. And again, we made our own little function for this. Cool bean. And we're never passing anything in this thing. So you probably don't even need that as well. If we did need it, I'd move it to the end and make it optional, so I don't have to always have that. So this is just doing the inverse of here. Now here's something that's never really good. If I get into place and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my six levels deep here. Ugh, I can't read that. That's horrible. Generally, it's just going through and figuring out what you should be doing differently here. You could go through and make separate methods for that. And we're going through the principles and the roles. Okay, so these are two separate things. We're going through each one. Name of this method is remove roles from principles. So this should just be remove roles from principal. Okay, we got a comment down here. I don't know what that is. I'm just going to delete it. Probably don't need it anyway. Remove roles from principal. Cool. Got our roles, all roles, worker, current, total, principal. Okay, so the one thing I do want to change here probably is when I'm naming a method name, I want to put the thing that's doing with usually one of the first parameters here. Put the principal end, just seems kind of wrong. So I move that up to say, okay, remove roles from principals, what I need to do. Okay. All right. Got our list in here. Again, this could be an IEnumerable. I don't really care. For each role, is this the same basic method that we had before? Probably. Removing roles from principals. And I want report progress. Moving roles and principles. Yeah, same exact thing. All right, you're deleted, gone. The control there that I always use is control up, control down. That moves the line up and down, and I think Resharper changes that to move like a screen at a time. I never do that. There's no reason why this actually shouldn't be its own separate method. Get role to use. Cool. And then we don't even need that other parameter. All right, so that disassociates them. And ooh, really? A try catch which is ignored. Yeah. So that's a no bueno. You always want to catch your exceptions and do something with them. At the very least, a message box at the very worst. Error disassociating. Okay, so this is slightly different. I didn't catch that one. This is actually adding roles to principals. Our standard report progress is removing roles of principals. So in here, I've got a message name. Or actually, what's the parameter? I'm going to keep that parameter name the same. Generally, you want to keep your parameter names the same. So user state, that's what I want to do. Object user state, and it defaults to null. Okay. User state equals user state or that. Okay. So this is just null propagation. Just it's a quick way to say, hey, if it's null, then use this value. If it's not, then don't use it. Just a simple one-liner. I like using that a lot. And also, this is resharper EL on this one, but here it doesn't make that big of a difference between whether or not you have got an if statement or not. But generally, if you can have a single method call at the beginning to export out, I generally do that. So actually, I will go ahead and do that. I'm going to invert that. And I will put that in new line just to yell at the person that, hey, we're going to return if these aren't valid arguments here. All right. So now I go to my report arguments, and I want to pass in this instead. Okay. Getting the roles to use. These are all vars. Got a nice green check mark out there. I like that a lot. All right, we were going to rename that one. Add roles to principal. Awesome. All right. Now generally this is a little bit long for the number of parameters I want to have in a single method. So you can think about creating an info object there that'll go through and put those all together in a single list there, or a single object. Let's call that done. So now the question is, how did we compare from one to another in our whole little refactoring exercise here? I had made a separate version of this original, and we're looking at the role manager. So the new version is 258 lines of code. The old version is 243 lines of code. So we only added about 15 lines of code with all those new methods. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 methods. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 methods. So we added a whole bunch of methods there, but that should make our code a lot more readable. So let's go back and look one more time at what it looked like before, see if we can kind of get a feel for what it's doing. And so we're getting the roles, does a query the organization service, goes and gets the actual business root ID. This is another query to go get the roles recursive, so we're getting those roles. We're doing that loop through there. Sort of remember that. Remove existing roles, principals. Okay, so we're looping through. We're getting some roles here. So okay, so sister users, and looping through each of those system users, and we're removing the roles for that system user. Also, we're doing the same thing for the teams. And looping through those. Remove roles from principals. Loop through all the principals for all the roles. Remove all those. Disassociate. And then we had the same duplicate method, just the opposite direction of adding them, basically. Okay, so that was the old way. The new way, just kind of see how this is different. It was all pretty much the same thing. Remove existing roles of principals. Okay, so this is a part where I made it simpler to say if it's system roles, we're going to do that. Else we're going to do teams. Cool. And then this is remove roles from teams. For each team, report the progress, remove the role. I mean, that difference between this function for readability and maintainability and this one, what's the name of it, remove. I think that's huge. When you look at the first function for the first time, you can't even see what goes beyond this first statement. All you know is that it's got a system, you're checking for a system user, you don't know what the other option is, and you're doing a query, you don't know why. In this option, when you're looking at it, you know right away that you're checking if it's a system user. If it is, you're going to remove the roles from the system user, else you're going to remove the roles from the team. Boom, done. You know what it does. It's self-descriptive. the actual implementation of what it's doing is hidden, but the actual name defines what it is. So don't be afraid to get those names too long. It just helps improve those readability. Now you can go, you know, you be crazy. Don't be crazy, but you try to be as concise as you can that still makes sense. So, um, so yeah, that's actually all the time that we had that I wanted to spend on this. So I only took a look at the role manager class, and I didn't get a chance to take a look at the actual plugin itself. So that's kind of funny. We didn't even get to that part yet. Hopefully you can see, went through this, we saw some things that we were able to do through our refactoring. We were able to remove duplicate code. We were able to make the code way clearer to read and maintain, and we were able to make the code just readability. It's really about the readability. Make it readable. 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 And then with all the extra methods that we added, it's easier to start working together if you have new functionality to pull from the existing methods you have. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any comments, please add. If you think something I did was wrong, please add. There's nothing I'm not going to hurt anybody's feelings here. I want to thank very much Chris. I want to thank him for just being willing to submit this and try something new. And hopefully in the future this can be beneficial for people and something that we can continue doing. So thank you very much and have a good one. Bye.